hate to make a decision, hate to pick a favorite. Yes, I need both, apparently. I don't think I actually need a Rider-Waite-Smith. This is going to be like the most Sylvie video that ever Sylvied. Hello everybody, it's Sylvie. Welcome or welcome back to Tarot Magpie. I hope you're doing all kinds of good today. This video is one I have been sitting on for what, like a year? More than a year? Like 2? It's the only 10 decks tag that has been kicking about on TarotTube for, I feel like it's been a couple of years nearly. It has taken me this long to get around to because I am a classic Libra. I am indecisive to the point of procrastination, and in that spirit I'm kind of smushing 3 videos into one maybe. So I've got my only 10 decks. And then because of the way my 10 decks kind of came out, I actually have 5 indie and 5 mass market, which was not intentional, but has meant that I've kind of thought, well, I could just add in another 5 indie for the only 10 indie decks and another 5 mass market and do the only 10 mass market decks tag, kind of all smushed together in one video. So that's what we're doing today. I hope you will enjoy. And I will get started with my only 10 decks that if I had to actually narrow my collection down to 10 tarot and oracle decks, it would be these ones. I can't count, I only have 9. Ooh, okay, I'm gonna have to rethink something. All right, it's only 9 because I left the Tarot Volatile out, so I guess we'll start with that one. These are in no particular order. It was hard enough to narrow it down to 10 decks, and my top 10 actually are only 10 decks. I think I've got a couple of like honorable mentions and what have you as I add more decks in, but this had to be in there. It wasn't the first one I thought of, but I don't think it's any surprise that I want to hold on to the Tarot Volatile. I love this deck. First of all, the art style, totally up my street. It's kind of grungy, it's a bit dark and moody. I like all of the extra like all these little lines I just think look really cool. This deck also comes with an extra Vessels suit, which I don't have shuffled in right now, but it's a alchemical 5th like ether kind of suit. And it also comes with a, well, I bought the additional expansion pack, so I have a lot of alternates for a lot of the cards, so you can kind of mix and match and like customize it a little bit, which I really enjoy. I know I've got quite a few of the mages. I have the kind of alternate ones with the different names. You can have all of the virtues in here. I talk about this deck all the time. This is going to be like the most Sylvie video that ever Sylvied, because it's like every single one of my top 10 decks I feel like are just extremely obvious. But I love talking about my favorite decks, so I'm doing the video anyway. But yeah, it's beautiful. The colors are beautiful. Like here, okay, so I have Dream instead of the star. Mostly because it's really pretty. Honestly, that's kind of it. I love the purple. Like these 2 cards are both really pretty. Like it is quite a grungy, dark deck, but then there are some really bright, beautiful colors throughout it as well. It's just gorgeous. This deck speaks to me like no other. I've talked about it multiple occasions. But yeah, and there's our Queen of Swords, our vicious Queen of Swords, which is what I love to see. So that is the Tarot Volatile. The Mary L Tarot. This was the second deck I thought of, but this was the first physical deck I ever owned, which is not like a wise decision necessarily. It's not a beginner-friendly deck. It's not an easy deck. It's not super consistent with the Rider-Waite-Smith symbolism or imagery, which, you know, is, I think, would be the most popular system. I do love this 8 of Swords, but there's just something about this deck. It was my first one, so there's a little bit of nostalgia, and this 8 of Swords in particular is reminding me that there are some entries from the guidebook that just burned themselves into my brain, and this is one of them, about the 8 of Swords being like a gateway or a doorway that you think is impassable, but it's actually not. So it's like very 8 of Swords stuff, and it's completely beautiful. It's completely beautiful and completely upside down. I think these are oil paintings, and it just captured me. The artwork captured me from the moment I saw it, and that's why this was my first physical deck. I was trying to learn on various like apps and things and just like writing down meanings in various notebooks. And then this was the first deck I purchased. I have this, is this the second edition that has like these glossy black edges? I don't know, I don't think it was around for very long, but anyhow, it's totally beautiful. It's just an essential part of my tarot collection, and I can't imagine having a tarot collection without it. Even though I don't reach for this one all that often, it's not a quick and easy reader. It is a bit of a deep dive, but it's just like these turquoises and these like hot chili reds are just delicious. And there's no way that a top 10 or an only 10 couldn't include this deck. So there we have it, the Mary L, the Outgrow Yourself Tarot and Oracle, or Oracle and Tarot rather. This is, again, I talk about it all the time, it's a favorite. I did these yellow edges myself. I love the backs. I love the artwork. This is based on the Thoth Tarot. So we've got, for the majors, we've got our titles, and for the court cards, it has their court title, but then it's the Thoth keyword. So here we have power, and I don't know the Thoth well enough to know what power is, but that's okay because I use this more as an oracle than anything else. I think it's just so, it's so good. I call it my like spiky deck. It's kind of passive aggressive, it's kind of a bit rude. It's one of those decks that like reads you for sure, but I love it. Why do you ask what you already know? Like, it's so good. It's such a to the point, almost a kind of be careful what you wish for, but it's not that. It's just, okay, you want a reading, you want some advice, all right, well, you asked for it and you're getting exactly what you asked for, and it might not be what you want, but it's probably what you need. It's fantastic. And I would not be without it. It's one of the most used decks in my collection. It's one of my kind of go-to decks. What else is there to say that I haven't said 500 times? So that is the Outgrow Yourself. The Fifth Spirit Tarot by Charlie Claire Burgess. I have the mass market edition from Hay House. Again, nobody's surprised. I love this deck. I love Charlie Claire Burgess. I love their work. I love their book, Radical Tarot. I love their ethos and their attitude towards the tarot, and I think they're brilliant. I love this deck. I love how it reads. It's a modern deck, which is so not for me, or it's kind of modern. It's kind of a bit of everything, but like we've got this chariot with the roller skates, which is so not usually my thing. This is kind of my pet peeve in a lot of different tarot decks, is when they modernize it and the chariot is always like on a motorbike or on a skateboard, and it's the chariot that always gets to me. So at least this is a little bit different. But like this Hierophant as like a librarian, it's beautiful. It's a little bit more pippish in the minors, but I find it just, it's definitely a pips with feelings kind of a deck. It's easy to read. Here we've got more roller skates, like this tower. It's so impactful, and even what you get in the little white book, or I suppose it's kind of a medium white book that comes with the deck, is really good. I think there's some spreads in here as well. It's such a good deck. This is also one that I use frequently when I read for other people, when I do client readings in particular. So I kind of need it from like a functional tarot collection perspective. This is one that is a bit of a workhorse. I think it's wonderful. I think it's gorgeous. The Fifth Spirit Tarot. Right, next up, this is the Way Home Tarot. This is an indie deck, and this is the other one that I have in here that I use for client readings frequently. It's the Fifth Spirit, a couple more, and this one is one that I pull out a lot. It's not pips with feelings, but it kind of is. I love the Empress and the Emperor. It's not exactly pips in the traditional playing card pips, but it is kind of light on the detail, light on the storytelling, and it's a little bit more intuitive, a little bit more up to your interpretation. This is a very spacious deck. It's got all this white space, negative space, which the Fifth Spirit also has. You can see that in the minors. It's not full scenes. That's what I mean when I say like pippish. It's not full scenes. I say that, that's a lie, because this is here. But it's not like people-y scenes. And a lot of the cards, like our courts here, they're just a representation. It's not a illustration, if that makes any sense. it's not doing a lot of the storytelling. It's leaving a lot of it up to your imagination and your intuition. And it's also beautiful. I love the art style. I love the artwork. I just love this deck. And it's one that I would just feel really wrong if I didn't have it in my collection. Getting down to 10 decks is hard. I've got to have easily over 100, maybe. I don't know, I was flirting with 100 a while back, and then I kind of got rid of quite a lot, but then I brought quite a lot in, so I'm probably at over 100 decks. My collection is not as large as some, but it's definitely more than any one person strictly needs. But there's a lot in there that I really love and that I would miss, but this is one that I feel like I need, as much as one can need a tarot deck. And I love the Six of Cups, so I'm going to leave that there. That is the way home. All right, I'm going to pull another mass market. This one might be a bit of a surprise. And as I was going through my decks and trying to narrow it down, I was thinking, you know what? I don't think I actually need a Rider-Waite-Smith with Pixie's artwork, but I would feel wrong without a Thoth in my collection. And I'm not sure why that is, because I don't work with the Thoth frequently. I don't know it very well. I really want to. I'm really itching to dive into the Thoth. I think I'm gonna do a Thothy focus maybe in October. I don't know. I'm like, oh, I could do like a Thothtober, and then I'm like, will I? Who knows? Stay tuned for my October picks for that one. Maybe I'll have decided by then. But I just would feel wrong without the Thoth, and I also think it's completely stunning. I love Lady Frida Harris's artwork. I think it's so beautiful, and I want to have this artwork in my collection. I've got that Aggro Yourself, which is based on the Thoth, so from like a functional perspective, those pair really nicely together, or I could do a lot of cool things with just those two decks, I think. Yeah, what else is there to say? I just want to have this. It just feels incorrect not to have this. Like, the colors are glorious. But yeah, I was interested to realize that I'm good without a Rider-Waite-Smith. I have one. I have a little Centennial in a tin. That's the only version of Pixie's artwork I've got. I've got quite a lot of clones. She's so beautiful. But I think I'd be all right. I think it's burned into my brain because the Rider-Waite-Smith is the system that's in most guidebooks and handbooks, and it's what most decks are based on, and it's what most books of tarot meanings are based on. So I'm like, I know that in my brain without having to have a deck of cards. And maybe it's also from when I was first learning tarot before I had my own deck. I was doing it based off the Rider-Waite-Smith, but without a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And so maybe that's why I feel like I don't really need one. But I do feel like I just should have a Thoth in my collection. This star is so stunning. So yeah, the Thoth. Okay, I'm going to grab another indie. This is the Tarot of Aphrodite. And this is, again, a kind of functional take on the tag as well. If I only had 10 decks, this would have to be one of them because first of all, it's beautiful. I love it. I love the pink. I love the artwork. And I use this on my Aphrodite altar space. I need it for that, basically, is what it comes down to. I don't have another deck that currently fills that spot. And I suppose I could very easily use any other deck to do that with, but I don't. I want this one. I also think it's completely beautiful and I love it. This is the first edition. The second edition has some smaller borders and some card changes, and this one only came with a book with the artworks in rather than like interpretive meanings. I just don't feel like I really want a guidebook for this deck. And maybe that's because I use it with my Aphrodite altar, so I'm happy to just make my own meaning and see what feels intuitive and see what feels like the message that I need to be hearing. I don't know, but I love it. And from a purely like functional perspective, if I was having a collection of 10 decks and that was all I could have, this one kind of needs to be in there. Like 10% of that collection is going just to this one practice that I do, as it should. Okie doke. The Morgan Greer. This is another one I use for client readings a lot, but it's also one that just completely speaks to me. It's loud. It's all yellow on the top because I recently showed this off in my Rainbow Decks video and I pulled out all the yellow ones. Okay, that might be slightly better. There we go. Yeah, this is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck in my collection. It's a clone, it's an adaptation. I love the framing of this deck because it's very in your face, or you're in their face, I suppose, is what's really happening. But it's much more kind of, it's louder, it's closer, it's these close-ups, and as a result, I find that this deck just kind of gives me a message loudly and quickly, and it's not making it frilly, and it's just kind of, what's the answer to your question? This is the answer to your question. Get the fuck on with it. Like, we're not dancing around so much, and I love it. I love this deck. I feel like I have such a connection with this deck. Like I say, I also use this one for client readings. So from that perspective, it's functional, it's practical, and it is a Rider-Waite-Smith. Would we call it a clone when the framing is so different and some of the scenes are so different? I don't know, but I think of this as a traditional Rider-Waite-Smith-ish deck. So I'm like, well, I have got that base covered with this if I want one. Love this Queen of Swords. She's gorgeous. And yeah, it's a classic. It's a classic in the world of tarot. It's a classic in my collection. Wouldn't be without it. Okay, final indie deck in this top 10. This is the Reclaim Oracle, and this is the 3rd edition. As I'm filming, the 4th edition is on Kickstarter for funding. I don't know how long it's got left. I don't know if it will still be up when I put this video up, but if it is, I will link it. I've shown this off quite a lot because I love it, and I know that I've had quite a few comments from people who are sad that they couldn't get this deck. So I'm just letting you know there's a Kickstarter. This is a Felix deck, and it's very simple in the artwork. It's black and this pretty pale pink, and I adore the artwork. I think the artwork is so evocative. I love the breadth of language used. Like, it's not just happy, sad, excited, whatever. It's like frustration and fairness and security and arrogance. Like, there are so many different nuances of emotion in this deck. And I find this deck invaluable in working out my feelings, because sometimes you've got to work out what you're feeling before you can work through it. It's comforting because even though I typically only go to this deck when I'm having some big feelings, you know, it always helps me sort through that. It always brings me to a little bit of clarity. And so I've kind of learned to associate it with that kind of comfort, because there we go, release. It's a release. And yeah, it's really valuable. It's really special to me. I'm so glad this deck exists, and I'm so glad to have it in my collection. There is a part of me that wants to get the new edition because there's an additional, I think some of the artwork's been reworked, and I think there's maybe an additional 10 cards, but this is my Reclaim Oracle, and I don't think it would be the same. And also, that's just unnecessary, but like, this is mine. I don't actually know what the additional cards are. This is mine. This has been talking to me for years now, and this does what I need when I need it. So that is the Reclaim Oracle. Right, the final deck in this top 10, only 10 decks, is the Guardian of the Night Tarot by MJ Cullinane. I have the mass market. There we go, we got the Magpies in the Four of Wands. This is my first animal deck, and it really changed the game for me, because prior to this I'm not an animal deck person, and then I got this because it was pretty, and then at first I was like, oh no, I think I have made an error, and then there was an entry in the guidebook and I was like, well shit, this is meant to be in my life, isn't it? And I'm not getting rid of it. So this was actually the first deck I thought of when I was like, who are my top 10 decks? What else is there to say? I love this deck. This deck, I use this a lot with the Reclaim because this is nice, and when I'm working through some big feelings, this is a nice deck to use because I know it's not going to be brutally harsh. But it's realistic. It goes deep without going dark, which is what I say all the time, and I need to make that video. I'm sure that I have a handful of decks that go deep without getting dark, and I think they're really valuable. I love this Empress. This kind of changed my perspective on the Empress a little bit, or deepened my perspective on the Empress, of that like protective, mothering energy. Because when you've only seen a pregnant Empress, and it's like, well, that's frankly not relatable to me because I have no intention of ever being pregnant. But like the mothering energy, the protectiveness, and like that is relatable. That's something I have experienced toward me, and that's something I can experience toward others. And it just made it more meaningful. It made it, I was able to connect to it better having read the guidebook for this card. And yeah, I can't not have this in my collection. So this is absolutely up there. It's very safe in its spot in my only 10 decks. And I don't know if anything would ever take this deck's place. Like, I could imagine maybe the Way Home, maybe the Fifth Spirit, maybe the Tarot of Aphrodite, they could maybe be replaced with something else. I love the Way Home, I love the Fifth Spirit, but they're kind of workhorse decks. And I could imagine there existing other decks that I connect with that I find that usable. And the Tarot of Aphrodite, that's linked with quite a specific practice, so maybe one day that becomes replaced or that becomes no longer necessary. I can't imagine anything replacing this. So yeah, the Guardian of the Night. These are my mass markets. These are my indie decks. Like I said at the start of this video, I selected my 10 decks and then I realized that I had 5 mass market and 5 indie, and so I might as well grab 5 more and 5 more and give you my only 10 mass market and my only 10 indie decks. So that's what we're gonna do. I am gonna start with the indie ones. So these are my first 5 indie decks. This is my only 5 indie decks. We've got the Tarot Volatile, the Way Home Tarot, the Tarot of Aphrodite, and then for Oracle, there's the Outgrow Yourself and the Reclaim. This is where I cheated a little bit because there's actually 6 decks here. I'll get into it. Let's waste no time. So the Lilith Tarot, by the same creator, so Reclaim Oracle. That's not why it's in here. It's in here because I bloody love this deck. But if you see similarities in the kind of shapes, it's because it's the same person. I adore this deck. Can we take a moment for the beautiful backs? Gold foiling. This is the gold edition, hence the gold foiling. It's beautiful. It's got that like white space in the background, that kind of spaciousness that was in the Way Home Tarot that I really love. I love having all of the like elemental and astrological symbols on here. The guidebook for this is also really good and is one I'm happy to always have in my collection. I reach for this a lot even when I'm not reading with this deck because it's just got these like handy dandy little like numerology and planetary symbol and zodiac tables in the front. It's just really handy. I think I spoke about it when I did a guidebooks video and this was in there. But I love this deck. I find it so easy to read. I find it that kind of balance of reading it literally or reading it according to meanings and going intuitively and just seeing where my brain goes. It strikes that balance really well. And I really love it. I love the size. I love the cardstock. This is such a beautiful tactile experience. The tarot deck is a physical object, and so having the beautiful shuffle, having it being pretty and feeling nice and having that nice guidebook, like it matters. We care about these things for a reason. Okay, the Tarot of the Crystal World is another indie deck I could not be without. This has actually kind of been on the back burner in my collection a little bit recently, but I'm sure it will come back around. It will have its time. This is a deck that I just find so easy to read. I don't have to like search for the meaning, but I can sit and think about it for a long time if I want to, which is a similar thing that the Tarot Volatile does. I find it talks very, I read it really easily, but it has a lot to say. Whereas something like the Morgan Greer, easy to read, kind of quick and dirty, to the point. I also adore the artwork, this comic styling. I love the kind of world this is set in. This does a bit of a mishmash of like, there's like some like Western vibes. There's this card where everybody looks like they've just stepped out of an office. And then there's some cards where it looks much more like fantasy or much more medieval or surreal. And I just think it's wonderful. I think the courts in this deck are really cool. I think the High Priestess is awesome. Like, I really love this deck. And it simply had to be. It had to be in the top 10 or the only 10. And I feel like this is also one I've talked about a lot. I think this was in my standout decks of 2023, so I know I talked about it a lot last year, but like I love this Page of Coins. There's just something about it that just feels, it's just good. I don't know what else to say. The Tarot of the Crystal World. The Ritual Tarot. This is a little bit more recently in my collection. I got this last year, last December. I'm fully on the Ritual Tarot train. I don't know what to tell you. I'm a tarot tuber who loves the Ritual Tarot. I'm aware that's not very original or unusual, but I do. I love it. I think it's absolutely beautiful. I love a collage deck. One of the things I love so much about this is that it does not have titles on the front. I've got the marked edition, so they are on the back. So here we've got 10 of Pentacles kind of hidden in the image on the back there, but they're just like beautiful art cards, and it's gorgeous. And this is one that it does not speak clearly, particularly. It's not particularly instant to get an answer. It's one that I want to sit and ruminate on a little bit more, and it does that, and it does that very well. And I completely love it. I think the colors are so beautiful. I love an analog collage deck. I love the kind of slightly messy, chaotic style. So yeah, the Ritual Tarot had to be in my top 10. My top 10 indie decks. Okay, this is where I'm kind of cheating, because that is 8 decks, and I cannot narrow down out of these 3 who the remaining 2 decks should be. So I will quickly go through them. We've got the Gay Marseille. We know I love Charlie Claire Burgess. This is their Marseille deck that they launched on Kickstarter, was last year, but it's available as of this year. And I think they are still doing printings and making it available for purchase. It's so gay, and I love it. It's so good. And it's not just inclusive, it's specifically queer. I think it's wonderful. It's a really fun take on the Marseille. Like the illustrations are in that kind of woodcut style that's traditional, but the colors are beautiful. There's so many different like hints to various pride flags and different elements of queer culture, and the mages are fantastic. Like this Pope Joan. The guidebook, I bought the separate guidebook that you can get. It goes into detail about a lot of these figures who are represented, and if you've read their book Radical Tarot, a lot of that might be familiar. Like I remember reading about Pope Joan in the Hierophant, or possibly the High Priestess, I don't actually remember, section of Radical Tarot. But it's wonderful. It's such a good deck. This has to be, okay, so if I've got 2 spots left, this has got to be one of them, because it's just such a gorgeous celebration of queerness and of queer culture and of queer history. And like, look at it, it's just gorgeous. This like gothy, punky swords court is freaking everything. I think it's wonderful. And then there were 2. The Lubanko Tarot, a classic in my collection. A beautiful deck. This also out of print, no plans for a reprint, difficult to find, so I kind of would want to keep this just because I wouldn't be able to get it again, which I feel like isn't a good enough reason on its own, but also it's beautiful. The artwork's gorgeous, these colors. This is another one that's not a quick and easy reader. This one makes you work for it a little bit, or at least it does me. The readings I get with this are just always a little bit different than I expect them to be. Even though it's actually quite consistent with the Rider-Waite-Smith, the reading experience is not, and I don't know how to explain it. That is just my experience with this deck. And so I want this to be, you know, in my only 10 indie decks. But at the same time, I also want the Raven's Dream Tarot to be in my only 10 indie decks. This is another MJ Cullinane. And it's an indie one, obviously. I did the edges myself. They don't come like this, but I was really pleased with how they turned out. I love MJ Cullinane's artwork, and I love this deck. This deck is so, it's so good. I just love it. I love reading with it. It's got that kind of surreal, dreamy slash nightmarish, depending how you're reading it, like unreality quality to it, which I just really enjoy in a tarot deck. I really like her art style. Also, you know, the tactile experience of this deck is so good. It's like a rose petal, but it's not sticky. It's really easy to shuffle. Even though the cards are big, they're thin, they're snappy, they shuffle beautifully. Like, I just love using this deck in a physical sense. I love the ravens. I love everything that's happening. I love this deck. And I also wouldn't want to be, I feel like any only 10 decks is incomplete without an MJ Cullinane in my collection, because that is the person that I am at this point. But it's hard. So I've got 11. I kind of cheated. I've got 11. I tried my best. So yeah, it's between these two, really, for the 10th spot, because I can't imagine subbing out any of the others. Simply not going to happen. So that's my only 11. Okay, so finally, my only 10 mass market decks. We had the Morgan Greer, the Mary L, the Thoth, the Fifth Spirit, and MJ Cullinane's The Guardian of the Night. And for this one, I did manage to stick to 5 additional decks to make it 10 mass market decks. So first up, these are in no particular order. This is the Crystal Visions. And I was kind of surprised, especially with another one. I think I will show that next. But I was kind of surprised that this was the one that made it. They are in a weird order because I hate these edges, okay? And I don't want to talk about it. It's beautiful. I trimmed this copy. Let's zoom in. I trimmed my copy. It comes with white borders and I just chopped those off, but it's gorgeous. Like, the colors in this deck, the depth of saturation, it's so pretty. It's so gorgeous. It's fantasy. We've got dragons, we've got like fae, we've got magical goings on. That's all our beautiful red ones. And the aces in this deck are some of my favorite tarot aces to exist. Here we've got some pentacles. This deck was such a surprise because I bought it on kind of a whim, thinking, hey, maybe actually there is a place for this in my collection. Because prior to that, I'd been of the mind that, like, oh, I don't want anything that seems like it's going to be nice to me. No, not that exactly, but I thought maybe it was a bit, I think I just had a bit of a judgment about anything that had that like fae energy, because I was like, oh, if it's a fairy deck, then it's probably kind of nice washed and a little bit skewed toward the positive. And that was just so not the case for this deck. This is another one that goes deep without going dark, much like the Guardian of the Night. I love the quartz in this sword suit. They're just beautiful. Yeah, so this, it goes deep without going dark, although it's pretty appropriately, the imagery is appropriately brutal where it needs to be. It's also kind of supportive without being patronizing, which is another thing I have issues with a lot of decks out there, especially a lot of oracle decks out there. I feel like they're not being supportive, they're just being patronizing. Which, like, is a me issue, but not this one. And so when I was looking at my decks, I was like, yeah, you know what, this actually does have a spot in my only 10 mass market decks. I think this has got to be one of them. So that is the Crystal Visions Tarot. Okay, so next up, this one came as a bit of a surprise, and this definitely comes with the kind of, not exactly disclaimer, but just disclaimer that this could all change tomorrow. You know, I'm bringing new decks in all the time. I'm working with different things. I'm changing as a person, and what I'm looking for in a deck is changing. But this is the Tarot of a Moon Garden. This is the new edition, or the reprint that came out earlier this year. It's linen. It's this kind of long shape, and it's got these delicious purple gilded edges. I love this. This was an impulse purchase. It had been on my list. It's been on my radar for years. But I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll get the reprint because these edges, honestly. And then I bought it on the day, on a complete impulse, the day before I moved 400 miles to Scotland. And initially I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. Like, I was like, it's nice, it's pretty, I like it. And something has just clicked in the last like month or so, an amount of weeks, more than a month now, and I've just completely fallen in love with it. It does exactly what I've been needing from tarot. It's got that kind of supportive without being patronizing kind of feeling to it. I've not really used the guidebook that much, but I think the guidebook does really kind of lean into that. It's supportive, it's a little bit whimsical, it's kind. But I've kind of just been using the deck by itself really. It's stunning as well. Like I adore the artwork on this deck. I kind of do wish I had a version with the borders, because you see, if you've not seen the original, this kind of decorative border around the title. In the original, it extends all the way around the image of the card. And so that's also why it's so long and skinny, because they've chopped off all of this. But that also comes with then an additional white border around the edge, and I think it's also hard to find now. So I like having this version. I like the shape of it. It's cool. But it's beautiful. I really love reading with it. I've loved pairing this with a lot of other things. I've loved using this as a Rider-Waite-Smith based deck. And I was kind of surprised when I was like, actually, yeah, this should be in my only 10 mass market decks. So that is the Tarot of a Moon Garden. And to come back to why I was kind of a bit surprised, these feel kind of similar. And I was like, do I really need both? But then I couldn't pick which one I would have got rid of and what I would have replaced it with. So yes, I need both, apparently. All right, this is the Goddess of Love Tarot. This is a collage deck. It is stuck in its bag. There we go. First of all, candle, please. This also kind of surprised me a little bit, and I was wavering between this and a different deck, but I did go with this in the end because I feel like I've developed a connection, a dialogue, a something with this deck, and I love the energy it has. I love the artwork. First of all, I love the artwork. I love a collage deck. We've established that, and this is beautiful. And I love the guidebook. This is created by Gabriella Herstick, and the artwork is by, I've forgotten her name, but she's Snakes for Hair on Instagram. But the guidebook by Gabriella Herstick is brilliant. I really love it. I really love this deck. My brain seems to have run out of words, but yeah, I've got a dialogue with it, and that's something that I don't have. Even there's decks that I love in my collection that I think are aesthetically stunning, that I think frame the Rider-Waite-Smith system really well, but this one feels kind of like a friend. And this feels like, not to personify my decks too much, but this feels a little bit more like I know this person better, like it's not an acquaintance, and so I can't ditch it, you know? So that's the conclusion I came to with this one, I guess. But it is completely beautiful. It has a lot of different love goddess archetypes, or like sex goddess archetypes in the mages especially. The whole deck has this love magic, sex magic flavoring. So also like it's got that like Aphrodite, Venus sprinkling. It's wonderful. I love it. Goddess of love. All right, and ultimately is the Tarot del Fuego, which also was almost a little bit of a surprise, but then I realized it wasn't, because I love this deck. I'd be interested to hear from anybody else who's like done this tag, which is everybody but me at this point. And I probably could just go back and rewatch some videos, but I was like surprised by the ones that felt obvious, and I don't know what I expected, but the reality of it was a little bit surprising all the same. I love the artwork. It's weird and wonderful. It's colourful, it's vibrant. Also, it's removed enough from the Rider-Waite-Smith. It's doing its own thing with especially with the imagery, that it's a really interesting reading experience. It's a really, what's the word? Like, sometimes you just need a completely different perspective, and you need to talk to somebody who has a completely different perspective on a situation than you. And that's kind of what this deck is. Again, not to personify my decks too much, but we all do it to an extent. This has an unexpected, or it communicates messages that I would not necessarily expect, or rather I take from it messages that I would not necessarily expect. And I think it's extremely valuable. And I also just think it's extremely cool. I love the artwork on this deck so freaking much. And I did. I picked this over a lot of other decks in my collection just because I think it's so cool. And I'd rather look at this than plenty of other decks out there. So that is the Tarot del Fuego. And the final mass market deck in my only 10 mass market decks extension to this video is the Sustain Yourself Oracle. I imagine that this would not come as a surprise. I talk about this deck frequently. I talked about it quite a lot recently on this channel because I picked it or I included it in my tarot picks for August, and then I did a video setting up a study journal for this deck. I did like a collage cover to like fit the vibes. And I've been working with it, and I've also just loved it for a long time. I think this is also a standout deck of last year. I love the ecology, nature kind of theming. I love some of these words. I think they're so interesting. Like we've got purification with creative chaos. I think is such a cool combination, and like there's a lot of nature words like sun and energy, then arrowhead and implementation. It's not just about nature, it's about humans and us being part of nature, and nature being part, like we're within the world and we're interacting with the world. And so our material culture is just as important, relevant, just as much a part of the world as it is an impact on it. So yeah, I just find this I find it so cool. I also just find it really sparks some really cool stuff when I use this, and some of the language, some of the specific word choices on this deck and also in the guidebook are really good, and they really do just get my brain going. And I really like, it's just a good oracle deck. It works, you know, or at least it works in my brain for me, which this is my collection, so that's the most important thing. And then we have it with self-knowing. So that is the final mass market deck, and that is everything from me. So this was my only 10 decks, only 10 indie decks, only 10 mass market decks, kind of 3 in 1. I enjoyed myself thoroughly. I can believe it's taken me this long to get around to filming this, because like I say, hate to make a decision, hate to pick a favorite, but I did. And I picked 21 decks. I only kind of cheated once, and I think that's pretty impressive. So I'm going to leave you there. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for spending some time with me. I really hope you enjoyed this one. Give me a like if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Check out my Instagram, my Etsy, my Patreon, all that good stuff. And I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.